Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a book roast for The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. This is going to be an ongoing series that I do where I ask all of you over on my Instagram your unpopular opinions about popular books. I will do this for both books I like and books that I don't like. You don't have to have read the book in order to watch this, because if there are any with spoilers, I will put those ones at the end, and I'll give you a brief summary of the book to start, so that way you kind of know what we're working with. The setup for this story is that you follow a young man named Locke Lamora, who is a part of this essentially religion of thieves. He doesn't steal in order to survive, really. He doesn't steal to give to the poor. He steals because the nameless god that he serves, that is what it is the god of, which is thievery. And so him and the merry group of misfits that he is with, that's kind of what they do. They pull off these crazy heists, they get into trouble, and then they get out of trouble. And sometimes the trouble can be a little bit more than maybe they bargained for. One of the things that fans often praise this book for is the friendship, the relationship between Locke and Jean. That said, the first comment as part of the roast definitely disagrees with this. It says, "I don't see the amazing friendship between Locke and Jean, no more special than any of the others." I personally do not understand why people seem to think that the friendship is so well fleshed out. Throughout the book, the author takes advantage of the use of flashbacks in order to give you some context for relationships and other things that are happening in present day. And I would say the friendship is part of that. If you're somebody who hates flashbacks, then you're probably not going to like that about this regardless. I don't hate the use of flashbacks if done in a way that I think it ties into present day really well. However, I don't like the use of flashbacks when it's essentially the only way in which you are delivered certain bits of information. So for example, with this friendship with these two characters, I personally felt like we didn't really see it building much in present day. It was more that we saw how they met, and it was like the most I feel bad, but I'm sorry. I felt like it was the most stereotypical way in which two boys could become friends, which is at first they don't like each other, and then they fight, and then they're like, oh, it turns out we have a lot in common. Now we're best pals. It just felt very cliche to me, and I know that sometimes things that you see often, they can still be done and done in a way that's really original, but for me, the way that the friendship started, I was expecting to kind of see that and be like, oh, okay, that's a little cheesy, and then see their relationship blossom from there, or see the relationship building from there. And it was just like, oh, now they're friends. The next one says the cusses sometimes get stuck in awkward places in sentences. So a lot of people who don't care for this book don't like the way in which the author uses curse words, and there are definitely a lot of them, and I don't actually have any problems with cursing in books. However, in this one, I mean, everybody talked pretty much the same, and they were always really colorful curses and kind of bizarre, and for some people they're gonna love that and they're gonna think it's really funny and really entertaining, but for me it didn't have enough variety. I would expect some characters to speak like that, maybe the characters that are involved in this group of thieves, but then there are other characters who are supposed to be more like the prestigious individuals in society, and I felt like they kind of their way of talking wasn't that different. The next one says, no women. Where are all the women in this story? There are some, but there's definitely more male characters, and I would say the male characters are definitely more main type characters, and the other ones are just people that appear and that the male characters interact with. There are quite a few that just talk about how they felt like the book was super boring, and if you don't like the characters, I feel like this is definitely going to be a boring read for you, because I think it's the characters and the writing style that is so appealing to so many people. But if you don't like either of those things, then I would say, yeah, it's gonna be really boring. I felt like so often throughout the story we're told how witty and intelligent the main character Locke is, and I think that the writing itself is wittier than the character. I felt like he was almost like that Jack Sparrow type, where it's like, is it because he's so smart, or is he just lucky? Did he plan all this? I think, not saying it needed to be like Pirates of the Caribbean, but I guess that feeling of, is he actually planning all this out, or is he just lucky? I think I would have preferred that in the story, because I was constantly told Locke is so intelligent, he's so clever, he's so witty. And instead it was kind of like, he's kind of an idiot. The next one says too many flashbacks, and I actually liked the flashbacks for the first portion of the book. I felt like they were very relevant to the things in present day. And while earlier I was saying I don't like when they're essentially a crutch for the storytelling, I still thought they were woven into the story well initially, but the further along we got, the more I didn't care for the flashbacks. I also felt like the further into the story you get, the more the stakes are being raised and the crazier things are happening and the pacing is moving along, but then you get flashbacks, and on top of getting flashbacks, you also get these random small chapters that just tell you some kind of anecdote. Here's some story about some sports game in the city, which was good if you like almost lore and the lore within a city and a culture. But for me, that kind of stuff, I think maybe if it had consistently happened before chapters, then maybe it would have felt different. But to have it just be basically like chapters later on and with a mix of flashbacks, for me, I ended up, I would say, agreeing with this remark. This next one is not really specific. It just says it's just not as good as people make it out to be. I mean, I obviously felt that way. The next two both refer to the villain in the story. The first one says, the story should just be about them doing heists without the Grey King and Bond's Magi plot. The next one says the Grey King was a bit bland. I thought that this book was going to have such an amazing opportunity to have such an amazing, well-fleshed out antagonist. I was so into that part of the story for so long until I got to the end, and I was like, oh. The next one I kind of agree with, but kind of disagree with at the same time. It says, I thought the book was extremely predictable. I had a hard time reading it because of that. Certain things I thought were extremely predictable. There are certain deaths in the story that I was like, well, yeah, especially because all the people that died, I feel like were all people that got such an insignificant amount of development, so I was like, well, yeah. And then the downside to that was I felt nothing when those characters did die, because I was like, well, I mean, they just were there. But then there were other things that I didn't see coming that much. I guess I wasn't expecting certain things to turn out the way they did, which is, you know, it being not predictable. That's kind of what that means. This one is positive, which I'm glad this is in here, because obviously, even though it's a book roast, it's supposed to be a sharing of unpopular opinion. So I'm glad that somebody included something positive. This person said, are we supposed to dislike Locke? Because I can't. He makes me laugh so much. I'm so happy that he makes you laugh a lot. There were definitely some pretty cheeky, funny moments in this story, but I actually can't stand Locke. I said earlier, I just kind of feel like he just made so many decisions that I thought were so stupid that it was hard for me personally to root for him. But I do think that while we were talking about it being boring earlier, I don't think it's boring because of Locke. I think Locke is definitely an entertaining protagonist. This next comment is very interesting. I don't know if I agree with this. It says, it celebrates the wrong people, unrepentant criminals. So I will say early on in reading this story, the characters would do certain things and I was like, they're not completely evil by any means. I wouldn't say they're the most awful human beings in the world, but I just feel like there are certain characters who can be bad guys or who can be morally gray, but they're your heroes, or at the very least, they're your protagonists. And even though they're terrible, you kind of can't help but like them. And I definitely love those kinds of characters when you feel conflicted, like, oh man, I probably shouldn't like them. But for me, with Locke Lamora, I remember while I was reading it repeatedly telling my husband, I don't like these guys. I don't really find myself rooting for them because I don't care for a lot of the things that they're doing. I don't really like how they behave. I just didn't find them that likable. So I think to that degree, I would sort of agree with this person, but I don't know if I would have worded it in that it focuses on the wrong people, because I think that's kind of part of the appeal with the story, and I think that's kind of the point. So this is kind of interesting. There are a couple of comments about how people don't really like the audiobook narrator, and then there's another one about how the audiobook is better than the physical and that the narrator is fantastic. There's a particular one that I find contrasts this quite hilariously. So I'm gonna say I might agree more with the person who has deemed Locke whiny. Oh, there's another one that's positive, and it goes against what I was saying earlier, so I'm happy this is here. It says, people find the split timeline annoying, but I love it, and I'm so happy you love it. This is why I often say so much of it is just preference and how we perceive things, because I completely disagree with this. I liked it in the beginning and then I didn't like it later, but I'm so happy that it worked for you. The next one says, literally cannot tell the characters' personalities apart. So I mentioned that I thought the way in which a lot of them spoke was somewhat similar. So this is kind of how you tell them apart. Locke is skinny, Jean is not. There's a kid, and then there's twins. That's their personalities. Even though this is a book roast, I want to end this on a positive, somebody saying it's my favorite series of all time. I'm so happy that you love it so much. I hope for your sake that the next one comes out sooner rather than later. Let me know if you completely agreed with most of these, or if you maybe love the series, but you can see why some people would feel the way they feel. Or are you on the complete end of the spectrum where you love it and hearing this was painful and now you think less of me and a lot of these people? If you want an in-depth book review of this, I will have it linked down below, and let me know if you have any suggestions for other popular books you'd like to see me do this for. I'm definitely looking forward to doing this for Witcher, because Witcher is a series that I really love, and I am a little scared to see what terrible things people are going to say about it. Thanks so much for watching though. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.